Hello and welcome to Hard Labour on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes. Tonight we have joining us, we've got Daviemoo, TikToker extraordinaire, and Phil Moorhouse from A Different Bias. So today we're going to be talking about Labour Party policy and going into the next election and beyond. So I'm going to start with Davie. Davie, how are you feeling about Labour Party policy at the moment?
So I've been on a weird political journey the last couple of years where I've been trying to figure out where I sit on like the spectrum. And so it turns out that I'm a lot more lefty than I even realized when I was in my like real scary days of uni. And I don't really expect Labour to ever really please me fully when it comes to policy. It's not about really pleasing me because I don't think there's many political parties that are going to offer the broad kind of list of what it is that I really want, which I'm still trying to figure out. For me, the problem I have is that Labour seems to be spending a lot of energy capitulating to disenfranchised Tories over their traditional base. And even though it seems to be working, my concern is where that leads policy-wise.
How do you feel about it, Phil? Because you're coming from a different direction, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think certainly what we both agree on is that you don't get anywhere without power. So really the question is, are Labour... So first of all, I would actually disagree with the monarchy of Tories there. They're not trying to, it's not disenfranchised Tories, it's swing voters who one election will vote Conservative and another Labour. And a lot of them haven't voted Labour since 2005. So these are not even really political people. They're people grouped around the centre, and they're just making often a gut feeling for who is going to be the more credible party. And these people, and it's a small number of people, it's a few 100,000 people across the country that determine who forms the government each election. And there's obviously, it's all out of whack at the moment. Politics is broken. So in 2019, there were a lot of people who would never have ordinarily voted Conservative that did. But there were a hell of a lot that also abandoned them. Remember, Boris Johnson didn't get a lot more voters than Theresa May in 2017. But at the next election, it may also go the other way. Again, it'll not necessarily be Labour gaining lots of voters. It'll be gaining the swing voters that, will now be abandoning the Conservatives. And hopefully, or what the polls seem to suggest at the moment, a lot of Conservative voters who will never go to Labour just staying at home because they can't bring themselves to vote for Rishi Sunak.
I've got a couple of questions with that. First of all, Labour are 20 points ahead in the polls. Can they afford to be bolder with what they come out with at the moment?
This is the question, isn't it? It's like, if you're really nailed on for a win, can you rein back on some of the policies that we know are there for electability rather than what's best for the country? The issue is, although a 20-point lead can look comfortable, if it's being gained by appealing to, again, this small group of people, if all of a sudden you stop doing that, then you rein it back. The latest one, should we bring in the 2-child limit one? Because that's obviously the main bone of contention for this week.
Yeah.
And a lot of people,
just cards on the table here. This has pissed me off as well. Yeah. I don't understand why they just can't say, we'll see what will be, or at least be vague about it.
I will show you. So this is the polling that was done a week ago. For all adults, should it be kept? 60% say it should be kept. There's a problem for a lot of people. A lot of these people vote.
I hate this island.
In that but this is divide and rule. The Conservatives are very good at it because even when they're not very good at it, the media are, and they will present this idea that absolutely anyone that receives any sort of benefit is somehow a scrounger, and ignore the fact that billionaires or even multimillionaires getting tax breaks, well, that's also benefits, but they don't see it like that. But if we look at this, and you have done one of these things where they've broken it down as well. So this is just the general thing. We say, well, the general population doesn't actually matter because it's like a small number of people voting. But we can, and every demographic, by the way, it looks like this. We can even do it by politics. We can see these are Labour voters. These are people who voted Labour in 2019. So despite everything else, despite all the things going on, they still voted Labour, and 47% still want it kept. 35%, and I think all three of us would want it abolished. I certainly do.
I do.
But in terms of Labour appealing, like which group is more likely to be those swing voters around the centre? The ones saying it should be kept, or the ones saying it should be abolished? The ones who, yeah.
Just to come back to Davey, do you feel like you can vote Labour in the next election? Because my worry is that a lot of people like you, who would traditionally want Labour to win, are going to be put off to a certain extent.
Because what they're doing is focusing on, there's two things going on in terms of Labour policy. There's the things they're presenting. They can only do so many of those. There's only so many bandwidth. They're trying to get through to those swing voters. So everything you hear on the news is them talking to white van man.
Do you want to get that off the screen?
But, yeah.
I can't see you.
I think everyone understands. Everyone understands that it's about appealing to the white van man, but the question is, why is there never anything for people who are of a more progressive dint? And I understand that we need to appeal to the white van man because it's a cynical numbers game, but at the same time, is it not of concern that there are people like me who are very invested in politics who are feeling absolutely fed up with what Labour are offering?
But there's like 100 policies you approve of.
Yeah, and I get that. That's fine. The thing is, what are these policies really groundbreaking? Like rolling back on some of the really regressive stuff the Conservatives have done. That's not earth shattering.
Yeah, sure. So should we cover? So you're the expert on the NHS, right? So should we cover first of all treating mental health on parity with physical health? Wouldn't that be groundbreaking?
Yeah, absolutely.
So policies on that include providing treatment within a month of referral. Getting up to that. At the moment, you can't. I've known people, I mean, you will know more, who've tried to access mental health and have not been able to at all.
Yeah, I was talking about that today.
Yeah. That is, see, the way I look at it, it's like, ask me, because it's the choice is between a Conservative government and a Labour government. Ask me how many policies the Conservative have that I think are better than Labour's equivalent policy, and I genuinely will say to you, none of them.
Yeah. The thing for me is, though, the Conservatives are a dead horse. Like, it's not like the problem that I see is there's this paradigm in the UK at the minute of there's the Conservatives and then there's not Conservatives. Whereas I see it as Conservatives, not Conservatives, and being good in government. And my concern is, where are we on that scale if we're looking at electing this iteration of Labour without being listened to, but on what we want?
Yeah. So you've said yourself that you're further to the left than maybe you were when you're younger. I don't know how easily I can compare myself. I am very far to the left in that if I were like dictator for life, untouchable, the policies I would present are more left-wing than any Labour manifesto has ever been. But I also know I'm an outlier. And the people who determine who's in government are not me. Because the people where I am in politics, on that part of politics, they will do one of two things. They will either look at it and go, okay, I'm going to get a lot of what I think is best for the country, and I'm going to get a whole lot of things that I think is just an inefficient waste of time to please people who actually determine the elections. And then you'll get some other people who go, look, 80% of this I approve of, but there's this 20% that's not. And so therefore I'll vote for someone else or not at all, making therefore the party that gives you nothing as likely to win. Because the Conservatives they're certain to lose only because, first of all, they're doing nothing to help themselves, but also because Labour are focused. And, there can be an argument that on some of these policies, would they still win? And because it's not binary either. It's not a case of they win or they don't, of course. It's like, you can win and have a majority of 30, which is not that comfortable, or you can win and have a majority of 100, which is much more comfortable. Could they still do that with some change of opinion? Possibly they can. All I would say to that is they are polling the crap out of people. So they are testing everything they say, including in the way they say it, on lots of people. They're doing lots of focus groups, whereas all we get is national polling, which sometimes, as in that case, we can break down and we can make inferences, but we don't get to see that detailed polling. So all we get to do is to think things through ourselves empirically, talk to other people, but unfortunately that can sometimes just be an echo chamber if you're talking to like-minded people. And
Yeah,
it's
well,
very difficult.
we're trying not to be an echo chamber here.
Indeed. But
well, so
oh,
just to go back to Davey, like what you were talking about. There's loads of policies that you would like them to put forward. I mean, for me, it's not necessarily about, because I know the situation. I know the economy is absolutely been battered by the Tories' 13 years of misrule. I know that they're up against that. But what I would like to see personally is, don't rule stuff out. Like, it breaks my heart when Starmer says, right, no single market. We're not even going to talk about it. Shut down the arguments. I totally get that, but do it a different way. Do it in a way that we say, well, obviously we don't feel like there's an appetite for that at the moment, but we will go with whatever the British public wants.
Yeah, I think that's what's quite irritating, is that it wouldn't take much to please me on Brexit, because all you need to do, and I know that other people will disagree with this because it comes across as wishy-washy, is say, we voted to leave, we've left, we'll reassess dependent on what the mood of the public is. Like, that's all I want to hear. I don't want to hear, I'm going to drag us back into the EU with exactly the same deal tomorrow. I just need to hear, I'm open to discussing what the will of the goddamn people is, because we had to listen to that phrase for years. That's all I want.
The problem is that the majority of people in your position, it's like you will say that'll please me, and for all we know, there's a right load of people who will not be happy with that and swing back to the Conservatives. And
what's
so
terrible about we'll listen to the people, though? Do you know, like how would the right wing press spin? We know how they spin people.
They do it all the time. They're already doing it. They're doing it now. On one day, they're saying, oh, CPTPP membership means we can't go back to the EU. The very next day, there's an article saying Labour are going to drag us back into the EU. Everything that is not really explicit.
Surely that's an argument, just because, like, the newspapers are going to do it anyway. And that's the people who read the Storm and the Daily Fail are going to vote for Labour.
Yes. Because when Keir Starmer says we are not going to go back in, then it's like, oh, well, they're saying that, but then Keir Starmer says this. So then it's down to who they believe. Whereas if Keir Starmer says things that tie up with what they're being told that Labour are going to drag us back in. And remember, with a lot of people, it's not actually being dragged back in that's the issue. Like, a lot of people wish we hadn't left the EU. But what people are worried about, what they've seen, and this is why the Get Brexit Work slogan works. What they saw was politics being paralysed. Now, we can know that is because that public services were failing because the Conservatives wanted that.
Labour have a responsibility, and Starmer, to, like, not mislead us at this.
No, they have a responsibility to form power. I say this so often, I will always say it. They have one responsibility in opposition: to form power. In power, they have lots of responsibilities. And
this falls into an argument that really irritates me, though, because people like me often get told off for criticising Labour now because they have to get power and then we'll start asking for things. But what do people think that they're doing outside of power? They're currently sitting, making a game plan for what they'll do in power. If I'm not allowed to criticise them out of power because that might ruin the game plan, and then I'm not allowed to criticise them in power, when am I allowed to have my space?
From me, you will never have anyone say do not criticise. I support, for example, Steve Bray, and he is attacking all politicians for not, being honest about Brexit, for example. I don't say to Steve Bray, shh, just leave it, will you? I absolutely will say criticise. Because here's the thing, by criticising, you may get through to some people whose minds we need to change anyway. Ultimately, if you want to change policy, you need to change the minds of target voters. So by criticising it, you have a good chance of getting through to some of those people. Those are the people whose opinions we need to change. You could look at hang on, should I do another one? If we look at the polling on, say, sorry, I'm just going to hide myself again.
Bill loves this
I love this. But if you look at, like, support, this is, Britain said they would now vote to rejoin. Now, obviously, we know there's no campaign and there's no one going, oh, do you know what that means and everything like that. But, I mean, you just look at it. There's this ever-widening gap between those who would actually go, do you know what, we should join, and those saying we should stay out. And even those saying we should stay out, you've got to think they're split several ways. Some of them are just diehard, the ones who would always have said we should leave the EU, even in the days when there was very few of them. But some of them will just be people going, look, it's been messed up. We can understand the Tories are incompetent. We'll give Labour a chance. But at the same time, once they've done that bridge repair work, I don't expect Labour to just go, right, we've made Brexit work now, that's it. Because everyone will go around, well, no, you haven't. So what they're wanting to do is behind the scenes.
Brexit work, Phil, is just the most ridiculous. To me, it's like you can't make it work. It's like getting a rusted out old hulk of a car with no windows and no wheels
but
and
what do
no
you,
engine and say,
what do you mean by make Brexit work? What do you think it means?
That's just it. It's just buzz phrases. But there's a very interesting article that came out today. There was an article that came out today that was fantastic. That was in the Financial Times, and it explained that there's a phenomenon that I honestly wanted to cry when I read the name, but they're calling it Brexit 2.0.
Yeah.
Which is the longer that we're out of the EU, the more they're going to come up with new regulations about how we trade or how you trade with them. And the problem is, and the irony of Brexit is that we still have to conform to what it is the EU wants so that we can trade with them. And as they diverge further, the question becomes, do we also follow them, or do we try and trade less with our closest partners and try and make more trade deals with what was it this week, Malaysia or Singapore, where we're not allowed to criticize anything that we buy from them?
No, we're going to sell stuff to Burundi, well, not Burundi, Brunei in Borneo. We're going to sell stuff to Brunei, to the Sultan of Brunei. It's a dry state. 20% of our food and drink exports are Scotch whiskey. So that's 20% that we're not going to sell to Brunei. You can actually put in jail for having alcohol.
Honestly.
But this is the thing, though. It's like...
Phil, do you actually think that make Brexit work is a good slogan? Because
it works. It is an absolute nonsense. Like, so there's a lot of people thinking make Brexit work means get ourselves back into the trading position that we had, like, get all these benefits back. It doesn't have to mean that. It can mean anything. It's like get Brexit done. What the hell did that mean? It meant whatever people wanted it to mean. That is the trick of a political slogan.
I think get Brexit done, to be fair to the Tories, which I don't like being, but come on, it did mean let's pull out of the EU, which they, to be fair, they did. Not to everyone it didn't.
Not to everyone it didn't. No.
Do you think some Remainers voted for it? Because
Remainers absolutely voted for it. And do you know why? Because, like I was saying, I'm telling you, polling found this out afterwards. In fact, we knew it beforehand. What was happening is there were a load of people looking at the government, not managing public services. They weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. They thought to themselves, well, they're distracted by Brexit. To a certain extent they were, but they were also happy for those public services to fail anyway. What they wanted was for Boris Johnson would get Brexit done. For the ones who wanted to leave the EU, it was like, this is how we leave the EU. But to everyone else, it was like a torturer. All you have to do is sign the confession and it all ends. Because that was his line. That's what the oven-ready deal was all about. He was trying to say, Labour are going to carry on negotiate. We've got it. We've got it all done. It's done. All you have to do is vote for us. And then in a few weeks' time, it's done. And then we can forget all about Brexit. It's done. And of course, it never was. But that was his pitch to people who didn't want to leave the EU, but did want it all to be over. So it was absolutely aimed. The get Brexit done wasn't just leave the EU. It was, can we finish with this years long?
Okay, I take that. But I think that getting Brexit done is actually something that could be done. You could actually leave the EU. Making Brexit work is impossible. It's an oxymoron.
But that's because you're thinking make Brexit works means make the UK successful outside of the EU. It doesn't have to mean that at all. Yeah. It can just mean have a functioning government. Have a government that instead of whenever anyone says, oh, we need a trade policy. Okay. Oh no, the trade policy says we need to trade more with the EU. No, throw it away. That they actually go, oh right, okay, that's interesting. We need to remove trade barriers. Okay, let's do that then.
Well, I mean, so as far as the criticism of these policies are concerned, like that stat that you just showed us there about the two children families, or more than two children families, that just breaks my heart that we live in a society in which people in this country are so cruel. And I hate that the government, even a Labour government, have to somehow reflect that cruelty.
It's not cruel. People just don't understand. They think, because No, it's only cruel if people think these people are suffering because of it. But they don't. They don't. Yeah, I know they're suffering, but they don't think that. They think to themselves, well, they're sat at home watching Netflix, chain smoking.
So just to go back to Davey, what else would you like to see Labour before this next election? And we all know the issues that they're facing going into it. What would you like to see?
All I want to see is more proactive engagement with elements of the leftist politics. I'm not asking for them to like fucking what. I'm not asking for them to like make a special group so that we can all get together and hug each other. I just want to hear some voices that say more things like me. There are some fantastic speakers on politics that I listen to regularly who make very commonsensical arguments for more progressive policy. And I just don't see that, you know. And I'm like, being fair to Labour, there are some good policies they're coming out with. I read the Labour list piece that came out the other day. The ending benefit sanctions, nationalising failing rail systems and stuff, scrapping the Rwanda plan. Thank God they've actually said that they're going to do that. And I'm really keen to read what they're going to do about child protection online and see what they're going to do in the reforms to the Tory bill about online safety, because there's nothing in there at all about protecting women.
No.
I want to, like, just stuff like that. But when it comes to actual policy, like, the big thing for me is I don't want to sound like a northern version of Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's not about it's not about
don't.
It's not about deregulation. It's about reformation. Like, there's certain things that I just don't think are going to continue to work. And we need to start looking at what the potential solutions are. And I want to hear about what those potential solutions are now that Labour can work, you know?
That's really interesting.
One thing I will say as well is I really need to sit down with Wes Streeting and be like, please, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. Please just
All right,
stop.
we'll try and get you and Julia Patterson in a room with Wes at some point.
Good luck with that.
Be gentle. No, but what you're saying there, though, I don't feel like it's so much. And don't if you feel like I'm putting words in your mouth here, you know, slap me down. But I feel like it's not so much the policies necessarily, as Phil says. It's probably like 100 policies you agree with. It's communication. And Phil and I have spoken about this a lot, and Davey and I have spoken about it as well independently. Like, Labour's comms are just. It seems like they have like a one-size-fits-all model where they just say, okay, here's the thing that goes out. Targeting, as Phil says, that demographic that might swing from the Tories to Labour. But there's no reason why they can't have channels like this that go out for people who are more, say, not this one in particular, but the people who are more on the hard left. You know, doing stuff with Novara Media even, or Double Down News, to make sure that they get their message out on that platform. And actually, okay, they'll get challenged on it, but at least they're not, those platforms aren't being dominated by people who spend every single episode slagging off Labour.
Yeah. I mean, well, we have talked about it before. It's their communications are very poor. There's nothing to stop them. In terms of the mainstream media, they have to use that bandwidth to target those key voters. But they've got the potential to have lots of other outlets as well. You know, I keep looking at the moment, they're putting like stuff on their YouTube channel again because there's a campaign. It's pants. And they're not trying to build a viewership. So it's all real. You know, you can have one video 6 days ago, 11,000 views. There's one 7 days ago, 713 views. And that's got Keir Starmer on it. It's ridiculous. It's a joke.
Oh, my climate change video today got more views than that. That's my worst performing video so far on the channel.
Well, I did.
One of the strange things that happened a little while ago is that some of us kind of did a bit of outreach to them and said, like, you know, back when I was way more like singing the Labour tune, I was like, hey, I'd like, you know, we'll help. We have platforms that are ever growing. Do you want us to talk about policy? Do you want us to talk to the people who are interested in hearing what we've got to say? And it was, I might as well have just screamed into this glass. I got nothing back. They were like, oh, that sounds really groovy. We'll hit you up sometime soon. And that's it. And I'm just like, okay, well, you know, like, it's not like I think of myself as some like fucking paragon of politics, but I've got 69,000 people following me on TikTok. Yeah. Like, it's not millions, but I could certainly turn around to the 69,000 people that follow me and go, this really good policy is coming, and I think that that's really good, and it moves us in a better direction. And instead, I'm just sat there going, I don't know. Like,
yeah, Have you been approached by Labour at all, Phil? Have you?
I've done what David said. I actually approached them through multiple people. I get boggle back, absolutely boggle. I mean, let's have a look here. If I do last 28 days, I get over 500,000 unique viewers in the last 4 weeks, and about 60% of those are in the UK as well. So there's, I'm getting through to some of their target voters. And in terms of the age demographic, it is, like I've said to you, over half of my viewers are over 55 years old.
Wow.
And it's, and I sometimes I try and approach members of the shadow cabinet. I sometimes try to approach backbenchers. I've talked to you, I tried to sort something out with Clive Lewis to talk about proportional representation. Twice they've sort of gone, oh, yeah, maybe. And then that's it. Nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing proactive. But also, I mean, I know that other content creators have approached Labour. I've approached Labour, cards on the table. One of the reasons this channel exists is from a conversation I had after speaking to some of the comms department at Labour, and then speaking to some Labour MPs afterwards and go, what can I do? And they're like, well, you maybe set up your own channel. I'm like, oh, do you not want to do like an official thing? And they're like, But the campaigning on that level, that communications, it really does feel like it's just decades out of time.
I mean,
out of sync, doesn't it?
not to be like that guy, but Labour is run by like old rich white men, and so they're like that. They're like, we know what people want because everyone wants what we want, and people like me are going, I might have this and I might have that down there, but I don't think you got my politics. Like, and I talked to one of my family members the other day who's so like painfully close to voting age. I'm really hoping that the next election is the first time they can vote. And I was talking to them, and honestly, they were like, I really want to. I really, really want to. I'm like, for what beyond not the Tories? I think that's the thing for me. A lot of people are doing this like, well, at least they're not the Tories. And I'm like, yes, but we should be able to ask for more than that. And that's all my overarching point is, right? My whole thing is, yes, let's get the Tories out. They're evil. And I would love to see Suella Braverman cry if she's physically capable of doing that. But
no, she'll love it.
But ultimately, I just want people to want more than just not the Tories, because we deserve it. Especially after 13 years of literally having David Cameron screaming into our ears every night.
I absolutely agree with you on that. But at the same time, if Phil is right that like this is what the electorate wants, and our government has to be a reflection of the electorate, and unfortunately, a lot of the electorate's horrible.
What I will say is, I will offer some hope, that because what I keep saying is the electoral arithmetic at the moment will be very different at the next election, because at the next election we will have 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote, and we also will be getting, we don't know what proportion, a significant number of non-UK citizens, EU citizens, but long-term settled in the UK. That will inevitably, and the thing is, like, there's a lot of people that have a particular point of view. The way our society has been geared up over the last few decades has shoved them into the cities. And these are like bastions for Labour. So, a lot of the people saying, oh, give me more and things like that. I don't know where you're from, David, by the way, but just in general, I mean. And it's like, but Labour have got like a 20,000 majority there and they need to target these other seats. But if when they're bringing more people, millions more people into the electorate, 16, 17-year-olds, EU citizens who will definitely have proof of ID, and they'll be spread everywhere, not just in the cities. And a lot of them will actually be in these marginal areas. That is going to change the strategy for the following election. How can it not? And then if we get proportional representation later on, which I am hoping for, that again changes it. Because all of a sudden,
I see what, I mean, one of the solid, I don't know if they dialed it back, but, the reform of the House of Lords has been mentioned.
Yeah.
If that goes ahead, I see that as a Trojan horse for PR, because the only sensible way of reforming the upper chamber is to make it elected, and the only sensible way of doing it is from a form of proportional representation that allows each individual region to have a representation that doesn't allow the south of England or the southeast of England, let's be specific, to dictate what the rest of the countries of the UK have to do.
Labour have said in one of the key promises as well that came out of that leaked thing that came out to Labour list was that they were going to focus on devolution, which is something that I'm extremely keen on. I don't know if either of you have read Sam Bright's book about Fortress London, but that's all about the supercharging of the economy of London, and it's bollocks. You know, like I was just talking. Like I live in Leeds. I've lived here since 2007 when I came here to uni, and lots of infrastructure has been put into changing Leeds and modernising it, but like it's just not enough when compared and contrasted to London. And if we actually did devolve some power out to different areas of the country, I feel it would redress some of that balance. Like creating job opportunities around here is vital because there's just not enough.
This was Starmer's stated reason for it. Now, just because he stated it, it's not an easy thing to do. But one of his stated reasons is if you make centralized decisions, where are they going to make the decisions where you get the best return? Oh, London or around London. Whereas if you have decisions made more locally, they may not be the best decisions, but at least they are being made regionally. So they're going to bat for their own region, and it will inevitably create more investment because we've actually got further behind ever since Boris Johnson promised levelling up. The regions are further bit behind now.
Yeah, levelling down. Well, they had 1.9 billion and they didn't know how to spend it, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of any clever ways to spend. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So Phil's going to use this in the next election to go around knocking on people's doors saying, like, so the Tories had 1.9 billion and they gave it back to the Treasury because I'm going
to name the specific MP. If I'm doing it round here, I'm going to say Nick Fletcher let Michael Gove give 1.9 billion pounds that was supposed to be used for levelling up back to the Treasury because he couldn't think of anything round here to spend it on. I'm going to say that.
Again, that's another thing though as well that I was really interested to read that Labour have said they're going to do. Apparently they're going to focus on council house building. I'm not really sure on broad balance how unnecessary I feel about council house building instead of other initiatives, because I'm concerned that this is where I get a bit concerned about history repeating. We've seen what happens when a lot of council houses are built and then the government needs money and then they figure out. So I'm concerned about that. But at least it's something. Do you know what I mean? It's just that I kind of feel like it's a half-baked idea, and I get that with a few things. Ironically, one of the things that Labour actually put out recently that I was like, yes, please. Apparently, they're going to go for like almost an Australia-style crackdown on smoking. And as an avid ex-smoker who thinks it's minging now, I'm like, take them all away, ban it all. And I wrote to my local MP, who is a Labour MP recently, and I was like, hi, I noticed that every single weekend there's a ton of disposable vapes left in town, and it's really annoying me. Could we do a campaign where we create bins where we throw them because they have lithium-ion batteries in, and they're and he literally wrote back and went, no. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
That would be a council thing though, wouldn't it?
It would, but I think that it would also be good if it was being led by the government. If the government, I'm not even just saying for Leeds, I think that it should be a national thing. Well, people are completely unaware, one, of how dangerous those batteries are.
They are dangerous, incredibly.
And two,
women hate them.
And how eminently they're usable for stuff. Like we're just throwing shit on the floor. And there's I've written to him as well about there should be a national scheme to force big shops to turn their lights off when they're closed. He said, I'll certainly think about it, and then didn't do anything. I invited him to come to an event that I was throwing to. I'm working for a charity that's trying to legalise assisted dying for people who are terminally ill and very close to the end of their life. And he was like, oh, I'm busy that day. And I was like, just one thing, man.
That would help though, wouldn't it? Like that engagement with your local MP. But then again, I feel this comes down to communication again, and what they feel they are allowed to get involved with and what they're not allowed.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, you say in Leeds, I'm guessing your MP has a fairly hefty majority.
Everybody likes Hilary Benn. He's not a bad MP. I just want an email that's not this big.
I mean, my big issue where I am, I'm going to be made into a conservative-leaning marginal. And our MP is absolutely going to have to engage if they want to keep that seat. They'll win it next year, and then they'll lose it next election or the one after if they don't actually add value to the local community. Whereas some Because there is a split, isn't there? There's some MP. I know Hilary Benn's a backbencher, but there are some MPs who are focusing on like the national stuff and some on the more local stuff, and sometimes the balance is one way or the other. And it's much more likely to be on the national stuff when they've got a large majority.
I think that's the thing.
Politics.
Like a lot of the other lefties that I speak to have kind of just given up now, and they're saying, let's just work on small local initiatives to try and help our local area. And it scares me that that's the message from leftists, because like, to me, the essence of leftist politics, obviously not super far left, because you get into things like Lexit and like smaller economies and blah, blah, blah. But like the leftism that I subscribe to, that's the kind of thing where I'm like, no, we need broad change to help everybody equally. Yes. And so it frightens me that that's the message that we're getting from leftists, because we all just feel disenfranchised.
I don't listen to those ones then, because as far as I'm concerned, the biggest policy issues are electoral reform and Brexit.
Yeah, the electoral reform thing is interesting, because on that Labour list thing that I read, it did say that apparently the upper echelons of Labour are trying to move PR way down the list of priorities to the point where it's going to fall off the end. And I was like, please don't do this, please.
This is there are reasons why some in Labour don't want it.
Oh, absolutely.
Self-interest reasons. But for Labour in general, if they let the Conservatives back in, don't matter what they build up, it's gone.
Yeah.
Really that simple.
Yeah. So they have to make sure that they don't let them back in.
So
I mean, I haven't been that critical about Labour since I started Labour Social. And one of the reasons for that is just the idea of getting the Tories out seems absolutely, priority number one for me right now. And one of the reasons why we set this channel up was not just so we could help Labour win the next election, but also once Labour are in power, we'll have some kind of right to reply, have that two-way conversation, have that dialogue already set up between us and Labour MPs, the front bench, and to hopefully take some of the narrative in the way that we want it to go and talk about Brexit and talk about voting reform and stuff that we're passionate about. But I've given up thinking that it's going to happen in the next election, because it's just not. It's just you're talking about it going down the list of priorities. I mean, it reflects the electorate. People's main priority at the moment is the economy, because of the absolute hash the Tories have made of it in the last 13 years.
It's an intentional hash as well, and this is why I'm also concerned. Yeah. Like, I think we can give it. Like, I know that we can't be too confident, but I'm reasonably confident that Labour are going to win the next election in whatever form that comes. And
don't jinx it.
If they win the next election, they've got so much stuff to untangle. Even this latest stuff about the frigging ticket offices, because once they're gone forever.
They are gone.
It's gone. And that, like, I've met so many of my disabled friends are so scared of this, because it means they will not be able to ride trains.
Yeah.
And so Labour's got so much to sort out. So the thing that I've been raising concerns about is, what if Labour spend 5 years just mitigating the damage that the Tories have caused? They can't put in any progressive policy. Everybody's pissed off because nothing amazing's happened. And then back come the Conservatives like, surprise, it's us again. Ignore the evil moustache and monocle. We're much nicer now.
That is exactly what's pissed some people off recently, that Labour, for example, won't commit to repeal this or repeal that or repeal the other. We know they're going to repeal the anti-strike legislation in the first 100 days, along with the employment rights bill. But if they just waste all the parliamentary time repealing this or repealing that or whatever, then they won't put anything in. But on the contrary, Starmer's been saying, well, we can't just repeal everything. We can look at amending it. We can look at, regulations, guidelines and stuff like that. So he is intent on putting these reforms in. And as I say, some of these ones, like a national care service, you can't be fannying about with that. That's got to be ready to get started, because it'll take years to bed in. In terms of the mental health expansion of the NHS as well, there's lots of things in there, and that's just on health and social care. There's lots of things in there that they will have to get started on pretty quickly. So it sounds to me, and Starmer does get flack for this, it sounds to me like he is focusing on reform. Now, reform's a funny word, because there are some things where I will say it is actually reform. So if we have a national care service, that would be reform, like a social care service. Because I remember when Theresa May was about, I'm sure you do as well. She said, "Oh, we're going to take this money off social care. We're going to somehow make this pot of money smaller. Give it to the NHS. Oh, by the way, the NHS, you're providing all that social care now." So, so disentangling all that again would be a reform, because you'd be creating a new public service. Whereas some other things that we'll say are reforms are really just changes. They can still be positive changes, but for me, a reform is where you get rid of one vehicle for delivering something and replace it with another. Otherwise, you are just changing it. So I think there are some reforms in there, and I think there are other things that are just really changes, if we're honest. Like I would say, for example, of the last Labour government, there were the only reform was devolution. I would say there were no other reforms. I think there were changes. I wouldn't say anything was a reform. It was just making things work. Whereas like this Brexit. One, I think there are. Yeah, this one I think there are. So I think, you know, the National Care Service, I think if reform of the House of Lords actually happens, that would be a reform. That's undeniable. If we've got regions making more decision making in terms of how, you know, funds are invested, you know, there are some reforms, and then there are other things that are just changes.
So to finish off, I just want to ask about sort of what do you, first of all, Davey, what do you feel Labour could do communications wise now that would help them stop getting all this flack from the hard left? Because every time I go on Twitter, every time I go on TikTok, my feed is absolutely full of people that I follow and people that I like and respect, absolutely going nuts about what Labour are doing, or the fact that Labour haven't done something, or the fact that Labour have done something. And what do you think they could do to sort of improve those relations?
The first thing is just freaking communication. It really is woeful. It's embarrassing how bad they are at it. And I think another thing as well is to understand that there is a core element of votership within the party who's always been there, who are hard left, and they might not necessarily be members, but they know that it's necessary to vote for Labour to get the Tories out. Don't necessarily take those votes for granted, because there are a lot of people who are, I speak to a lot of people on the internet every day, and there are so many people who are saying, I'm doing it because I need to get the Tories out. And all I can say is, I don't think they realise how tenuous that grasp is. Getting the Tories out, fair enough. That I'm sure, hopefully that will happen. But the concern is, no one's asking for policy afterwards. What's Labour actually going to do to please the people that just want the Tories out? What reforms do those people actually want? I talk to them and I ask. The reason that I changed my political stance was that I stopped going, oh, see, you want 5 more years of Tories? Just frigging engage, hear the criticism and address it. You know, I'm not even saying it has to be a good answer, but just don't sit there and be like, what? Every time someone asks you a question, that's it.
Okay, so I just want to take this over to Phil. Do you think it's worth Labour's while engaging with people on the left, just even a little bit, in order to get a few of them to just calm down a little bit?
Because it's easy.
Do you think this is an open goal that they're just not taking?
I'm going to disagree with the relative numbers here, because as you say, a lot of people on the left, I'm broadly supportive of Labour anyway, but a lot of people on the left, after Jeremy Corbyn stood down, I was at my local Labour Party and I stood up when we were talking about who we should back. And I said, look, you know, you put a red rosette on a goat and I will vote for it. And so will everyone in this room. But the people that we need to win over are the people who don't think, well, at least let's just get rid of the Tories. A lot of people in the centre are not voting to get rid of the Tories. They're voting for what they think would be better. But the Labour should absolutely use other forms of communication to hit other demographics, whether it be young people or whether it be, you know, middle-aged people, you know, much further to the left, because it's easy. It wouldn't cost them anything. Yeah. YouTube would be self-funding. Yeah. I make a stupid amount of money from talking to a camera. Really? And if I can do it, I make like, oh, you're on the wrong platform, mate.
You are.
I'm not smart enough for YouTube. The only reason people like me on TikTok is that I'm like, hi, I've got 3 minutes to tell you this thing, and I'm going to pretend I'm intelligent. Okay,
but you can do that on YouTube as well.
You can, yeah.
Same video.
But Labour could I mean, if I can do it in a shed, Labour, the largest political party in Europe.
I know.
So, if they just got two people to do their content, they would make a fortune.
Yeah.
And they would pay for their wages, and then they'd have another way of asking for donations as well. It's like, instead of join on Patreon or whatever.
I get emails.
Would you like to donate to the Labour Party?
Yeah.
Or join the Labour
chats.
Party?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's such an easy thing to do. It would be a piece of piss to do that.
So I think we were all slightly in agreement here that it's not necessarily the policies that Labour are pursuing that is irritating a large portion of traditional Labour voters. It's the communicate. Well, some are, but it's the communication more than anything. I'll point something out. A few weeks ago, right, Phil, we had that Jenny Jones, the Green lady in the House of Lords, who was a Lexiteer, by the way. But whatever. She brought in a fatal motion, and it was going to kill. Was it the immigration bill that she was going to kill it dead?
Yeah,
apparently. And I watched Phil's video about it afterwards because I was like, what the hell? Didn't they just go along with it? And Phil explained really well, really eloquently, why they didn't go for the fatal motion and why it would have made no difference anyway, because it could have just gone back to the House of Commons and then they would just get their MPs to vote for it. And Labour did not make any effort whatsoever to explain that to the voters or to Labour members or to anyone, except Wes Streeting's really crass tweet about it, where he said, well, if you don't want things like this to happen, you should vote for Labour.
He is crass.
What?
His manner does irritate me, I have to say.
I cannot stand the man. I've tried very hard, but I don't like him. But I will say what was very funny. I'm mutuals with the Labour Lord that quote tweeted him and was like, hi, Wes, this is nonsense and here's why. And I was like, I was like, the girls are fighting.
But I felt that was Labour's job. That was Labour Com's job to communicate that. Why are you doing this? Why are they relying on Phil? Who was it on? There was someone on Twitter, I think it was Edwin Hayward or someone did a long Twitter thread about why it was done this way. I was like, why is it falling to these people who are not getting paid by Labour? They're not on the payroll to make this content that Labour should be making.
I think it was Fred West. I think Edwin hates Labour. But
sorry, Edwin, if you're watching this.
Yeah.
I love you, Bob.
Yeah. But
Fred West, he was a serial killer, wasn't he?
Well, it's not his real name.
John West. It was John West,
Oh,
the tuna guy. John West, yeah. Don't get your Westies mixed up.
Sorry. But it is their communication is absolutely shocking, and it's because they don't understand it. Davey was alluding earlier to like a groupthink that exists in Labour, and I think it does. They just don't understand it. They don't appreciate that it wouldn't have to pass through that. They need to use the mainstream media because that goes directly to the people they need to engage with. But they have unfiltered access to a lot of people as well.
Yeah.
And when elections...
Free access on platforms like TikTok and YouTube. And
this is the problem. You've even got silly weirdos like Nadine Dorries. And do you know who's got a really disgustingly large TikTok following? Matt Hancock. The first video that he did, I stitched it and I literally didn't even take a breath. I was like, hi, Matt, this is why I think you are the worst human being that's ever lived. And I hope that you watch this video and it turns your insides into jelly. Okay, bye.
Didn't help him sell his book, did it?
It did not.
Did
Mind you,
book out?
like I said, Nadine Dorries is on there. I don't know if she's still posting content, but Christ. Right. She was the one, she did this thing where she got a microphone and then dropped it at the end. And it was like,
oh no.
New single
no. That's like making up your own nickname, innit?
I've got a few nicknames for Nadine Dorries.
Well, anyway. Right, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thank you very much for joining us, Daviemoo and Phil Moorhouse. Phil will be back in the morning for Morning Brew, or I will be back in the morning for Morning Brew.
Tomorrow.
Depending on who's...
I was being volunteered there.
Well, no. I was just. I don't know when this is going out.
Oh, right,
I just
okay.
put it out now. Yeah, so I'll be back in the morning for Morning Brew at 9:30 every weekday morning. And until next time, hope you enjoyed watching this. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.